yesterday we started the Mishnah in the 12th parak, the Mitzvahs Chalitza Daf Kuf Aleph, 101. And we discussed the following point, that Chalitza requires a Bezdin of a minimum of 3 dayanim. Now, we also pointed out that these 3 dayanim do not have to be dayanim. They could even be hedyotos, which really reminds us of another concept. I don't know if there's any valid analogy between them, and that's called hataras nedarim, which again requires a tribunal of 3 members to be mater and neder, but it doesn't require dayanim. It only requires hedyotos. So maybe there's an equation between chalitza and hataras nedarim. I don't know. Now we began a discussion about what constitutes a na'al, right? Because the Torah says, let's just read the pasuk. It says, "V'cholza na'alo me'al ragla." So the Torah used the word na'al. Na'al is one of those words in the Torah that has a very technical, specific meaning. It's a legal term, na'al. Now we said that yesterday we discussed 3 categories of a na'al. One was made with soft leather, the other with hard leather, and the third was made out of bat, out of cloth, without any hides of any animal. What do you say? A sock, okay. So now, we have the case of cholza b'minal, which is b'di'evet, right? That's where the Mishnah says, chalitzasa kshera. In other words, if everything was ideal, then we would require or kosher, not or rach. Why the Rabbana and the Chachamim so concerned and so inhibited about allowing you to use or rach? And it seems that or rach, even if it gets ripped, it still could be worn on the foot. In other words, if you have something that's made of hard leather, as soon as it rips, I guess it basically like self-destructs as a na'al. I don't mean that it goes up in a puff of smoke, but he can't wear it anymore. And therefore, it'll be crystal clear to him in a case of a ripped shoe that it cannot qualify for chalitza because it can't function as a na'al. But if the leather is soft, which by the way seems to be an advantage, let's say, for example, if you were a shoemaker, you would probably charge more for or rach because it has a tremendous advantage. And the or rach wraps around his foot in such a way that even if it's ripped, again, we don't know exactly what rip means. How much of a rip was it? It's a shear of priya. But even if it was ripped, it would still be functional. It would still remain like hanging onto his foot. And the Rabbanu Choshesh that in such a case, the minal is psula, and they don't know about it because they're not aware of the fact that nikra'ah, or nikres, with an I, and nikra'es, to pronounce it like Yemen, nikra'es, right, is enough to passel the na. They think, well, I'm still wearing it. It's still functioning as a na. So the Rabbanan therefore made a gzera, and they said, let's not use soft leather. However, with the eved, they're not going to undermine the chalitza. Can you imagine this woman's whole future depends upon this? Let's say the choletz takes a long, boat to China, and we can't get a hold of it. All we have is this one chalitza, and it was implemented with a na'al that was or rach. So b'di'evet will fall back and rely on this because the whole psul of or rach is a rabbinic psul. It's midivrei chacham. Now we get to the third category, and that's where we stopped yesterday. We're talking about a na'al that's made of cloth. It's not made of leather at all. That's not a na'al at all. In other words, in the previous case, we had a chashash that maybe it might be karua. So it's a nal that's not shlema, it's a nal krua. And that's going to be now we're going in a step further. We're not talking about a nal that's psula. We're talking about something that doesn't qualify as a nal. And when the Torah says v'cholza nalo, nal has to be something that gives a very serious protection over the foot, as opposed to anphilia. Anphilia sounds to me like a disease. And apparently this is based on a pasuk in Yechezkel Novi, who says ve'en alech tochash or tochash. That's called en alech, a nal that's made of or tachash. Or tachash is called a dovar hamogen al haregel. In other words, if let's say Chas v'shalom, a hammer would fall on his foot, he's protected by a nail. Or let's say he walks on nails. The nail is not going to puncture and hurt him through the nail. It's mogen al haregel. Bad eino mogen al haregel. So you can imagine that if some hammer would fall on the upper part of his foot, he's going to scream because it goes through the body. So that's not called an olech tachash. It's very interesting. Tachash becomes now, in a sense, our paradigm for the definition of minah. Now, I'm not sure if we know what tachash is, because I have a feeling it was something like supernatural. You have any note there on what a tachash is? I mean, it's not mentioned in the Gemara, but the tachash is the psul of anphilia. Yeah, but I think it was only like it was an animal that was created only for that. I think so. He doesn't say anything. I'm surprised. But what is the English translation of tachash, where he doesn't even bother translating? He just calls it anphilia.
This is anphilia. Rashi says shloteget. Does he mentions nothing here at all?
Nothing. You see the next Rashi, Tsula?
Yeah.
He says, the midei de mogen ve'ina, tichsiv no'alo. V'nal midei de mogen, tichsiv v'nalech tachash, v'hu or.
That's Rashi.
Yeah, okay, he's not committed to translate Rashi, I'm not saying. All right, now we get on to sandal.
It just says the Hebrew actually says here from Tesco, it's kind of a shoe made of leather, which is
So leather. See, he says he's not going into tachash. He's just saying tachash is indicative of leather.
Yeah.
Now we get to sandal. Okay. I remember the last time I did this, I also had a lot of trouble with this because you have to know a lot about the reality of shoes back in the day for the Mishnah and the Gemara. So apparently there's a sandal that only covers the top of the foot and it doesn't wrap around the heel. And there's another sandal that wraps around the entire foot. So sandal sheyesh lo ekev kosher. Again, kosher means l'chadchila. Before we said the word kosher meant b'di'evet. But that's because before we were talking about chalza. You know, there was a post facto decision that, you know, he gave a chalitza. Here we're talking about what materials can be used for chalitza. And in this shoe, which is called the sandal, sheyesh la akev, it sounds like, if I read this correctly, he's allowed to use it even lechatchila for chalitza.
Does akev mean just the heel or basically protecting the back of the foot?
Yeah, I think it means it protects the back of the foot. It has some sort of strap that goes around the back of the foot, meaning on the lower part where his heel is.
Like we have now.
Yeah, and it keeps your foot in place. You know, you can't, it's not going to, you know,
What's the doubt?
it's not like we call it in America, a flip-flop. You familiar with that term? I don't know if in Australia they use that term, a flip-flop. Yeah, and it's open in the back, and your foot goes up and down and up and down. There's nothing really holding your foot in place.
Yeah.
And that's called she'ein la akev. Puzzle. Now, if I understand correctly, puzzle means that's it. It's meaningless. Like we said before about anfilia, which is not mugging. Now, again, I wouldn't say that this sandal is not mugging, but I would say that it's similar to something that's not mugging in the sense that your foot is constantly falling out. Let's just see if Rashi adds anything here. Okay, Shulia. In the Masechet says, it says v'cholza na'ala. V'darshim, he says the Gemara on Daf Kuf Hey, so we're really, no, I'm sorry, Kuf Beis. So the Gemara darshins nal hara'uya lo. Ubeli davar ha'ma'akev es haregel ein hanal ra'uya lo. I don't know what he means by Eino Ru'ila. I mean, the man is wearing these sandalim, I think.
It's not suitable for him.
Would like to say again, and take this with a grain of salt, that Ru'ila means Ru'ila that his foot won't fall off, won't fall out of the knob. It doesn't mean that he's not wearing it. I mean, he's wearing it. He's probably walking with it. But, eventually his foot is going to fall off, or at least potentially it will fall. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be ma'akiv his regel, and therefore it's not ru'uyalo. I don't know. A lot of these concepts, and this could be a sugya later, are going to be relevant to Yom Kippur also. What you're allowed or not allowed to wear on Yom Kippur. Might be relevant to Avelus, Rachmana litzlan also. Because an Avel is not allowed to wear, Nalayin. What's a Na? Okay. Now we're going to talk about amputees. Yavam, I'm reading the Masifta's introduction to Yavam Shenechtecha Raglo. So he has a stump of some sort that still exists, and he's wearing a nail on that stump. So the Mishnah says the following: Min har kuva ulamata chalitza kshera. Min har kuva ulamala chalitza psula. So kuva is the knee. In Hebrew, it's called a berech. And he still has his leg, Baruch Hashem, up to his knee. So the part below his knee was amputated, but he has up to the knee. And he could put the berech, the knee, inside a knot, and he could tie it down. And that's chalitzasa kshera. But min harkuva ulamala, so means that his thigh basically was amputated. Part of his thigh. Chalitzasa psula. Rashi says minar kuva ulav malo shenechtach raglo minar kuva v'cholatz minar kuva lamal. Almost like he has a prosthetic. How do you pronounce it? Prosthetic leg that goes all the way up, to the beginning of his thigh. Again, he's wearing a leg, but the leg is not a shoe. Somehow, if it's minar kuva ulamata, then it's considered a noun. Again, the Gemara is going to have to derive this from Sukya. Because the Torah says, "V'cholza na'alo me'al ragel," and the Gemara is going to tell us that the word me'al is superfluous; it's unnecessary.
Firstly, we're saying that regel belongs to the knee and down. But the knee, still the knee, that's a regel. You have above it, no more knee, no more regel, and therefore it's not.
Right. He's saying that it's only derived from an extra word, me'al. The Torah says, "V'cholza nalo me'al ragel," and the me'al is coming as a rib, and it's telling you that he doesn't have his full leg, and yet there is chalitza, and there is a noun, me'al, like me'al haregel. It's considered taking off a shoe from his regel, but only because he has part of his foot, it's below the thigh. He's got up to the knee. Yeah. I wonder if he's allowed to wear this on Yom Kippur. Probably not. If it's again minar kuva lamat. See, they're really, in my mind, there are two dinim here, and they're sort of like overlap. There's one din that we've been discussing until now. What's a na? Meaning, what material is it made of? Does it cover his entire foot, including his heel? Is it strong enough so that if it breaks, he'll know it's broken? All those issues about the structure of the na. Here, I think we're not focusing our attention on the structure of the na, but more on the wearing of the na. He's got to be wearing the nal. And a nal is worn on a regel. Does he have a regel? Does he not have a regel? That's where we're putting the criterion on our kuva lamala laku lamata. It's got to be a nal on a regel. Again, it has nothing to do with the makeup of the nal. It could be, it's theoretically possible, it might look identical to any other nal. But the question is it a nal on his regel? And he doesn't have a regel. And the answer is he does have a regel, or he might not have a regel. So when it says v'cholza nalo me al raglo, the Torah is telling that this is also considered a regel. Yeah, but at what point can you say he's wearing it on his regel if he has no regel? But the answer is we're going to have to. Notice the Torah is giving us leeway by adding the word me al raglo. V'cholza nalo me al raglo. It's an extended regel. It's not the classic regel. Doesn't have a foot. But yet he has a regel. Why? And now we have to judge. To what, under what circumstances can you honestly say he has a regel? Chachamim had to juggle this, and they had to say, well, this is still considered a regel. Captain Hook would probably have chalitza. I think it was Minar Kuva Lamata. I don't remember. Now the Mishnah goes on to ask a different question. Forget about the material that makes the nal. Forget about whether it's on his regel or not on his regel. Does it have to be owned by the Yavam? Can he borrow it? Also, b'sandal she'eno shalo. Again, we're talking about a sandal that has a covering over the back of his heel, right? But he doesn't own it. He borrows it from someone. And the pasuk says, "V'cholza na'alo," his na'al, implying possession. Here's another case. I don't know why the Mishnah left this case later. I would have put this up further. Sandal shel eitz. This is like Holland. I don't know. Probably today you won't see it in Holland, except for tourists. They put a show on. But just can't figure out why the Mishnah lumps this together. With the Eno Shalo and Sandal Shal Eitz. It just seems to be just listing together, hodgepodge, combining together whatever has the same din, namely chalitzas ksheira. So even if you borrowed a shoe, it's fine. Even if you have a shoe that's made out of wood, it's fine. Oh, bishal small, b'regel yamin. Right, so he takes a left shoe and he wears it on his right foot. Again, the raglo has to be his right foot, so he's got to be wearing a nal on his right foot for chalitza to be meaningful. But now we're saying that the shoe itself could be a shoe that's designated for his left foot, but he could wear it on his right foot. I don't know exactly, what the reality here is. Probably you can switch it from one foot to the other. There's certain shoes, I don't think you can wear it on the right foot, if it's for the left foot. I don't know. In all the above cases, chalitzas ksheira. Also, sandal gadol shu yachol lahalech bo. It doesn't fit his foot. It's too large. Obekaton. It's too small. Shu chofes rov raglo, but it does cover most of his foot. Chalitzas ksheira. That sounds like b'diavad. We'll like we saw by Minol. That's pretty much the end of the Mishnah. Let's just read the last part of the Mishnah one more time. Cholza begadol shuyachol lahalech. Again, it's too large, but he could still walk in. The katan shu chofes rov raglo, and again, I think it means he could walk in, even though I don't know why this is any better than a sandal. Okay. Not sure about that. But anyway, in these cases, it's borderline, meaning on a Doraisa level, we can recognize and validate the chalitza because he's able to walk in it. But it's really close to, going over the red line, meaning it's not something that Chacham are happy with, because if you're going to allow him to use these oversized shoes or undersized, then he might come to use a shoe that he can't walk in. It's so large, it's just going to fall off his feet, or so small that he can't move with it. So therefore, we're gonna disqualify this. All right, let's make a note here that we can start the Gemara B'li Neder. Tomorrow is Wednesday. Again, unless we decide on a different chapter. Okay, then. So have a meaningful fast, and I'm going to run out now to the OU Center.